me preemptively complain for you. Yes, the lighting sucks. I'm sorry about that. It's hard to film in the garage because the light above me where I used to, where I work, fell down, so I'm working entirely by some other lights in the garage and then, of course, some lamps. And I know this is probably going to have not very good video quality. Please bear with me. I think you can get the general idea of what I'm doing. But this is the start of the first Patreon build. Yes, I do have a Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a patron of mine, go ahead and check out the link in the description or at the end of pretty much every video I've done in the last 2 months or so. And let's put a card in the corner just to be safe. And really, I'm trying to do, I'm going to say I'm going to do one big build a month for Patreon. And I need money for that. It's expensive to build most of these blasters. This is not one that was entirely funded by Patreon, although it pretty much was, because it's been about 2 months, and that is equaled up to enough for me to build a blaster. So I'm going to be doing a full video of everything I'm going to be doing with this blaster, a walk-along. It's going to be long. This is going to be a very, very long video. I hope you like, grab a snack, grab, freaking something to drink. This is going to be a very big video. But you'll see everything I'm doing, and there's going to be a lot of talking, and I'm going to skip over some of the mundane parts like doing all the sanding, but you'll get the idea. The project is going to be making the AK-47 or assault rifle from the game Rust, just like my Thompson and my pump-action shotgun, except for this is going to be way more authentic to the game, because the AK in Rust is iconic. If you've seen anything on Rust, you will recognize this weapon. It looks like something from Fallout, but it's probably one of the best designs that Face Punch had put out for any of their weapons. I absolutely adore the AK, and since it's one of the best guns in the game, pretty much everybody uses it, and, well, it's very, very iconic. And the base of this is going to be a Strife. I'm choosing a Strife because it's relatively simple and compact, and since I need to add a lot of stuff to it, that's going to work out really well for me. This is a pre-modded Strife. It's not finished, but I have started it. This was a blaster I was building to test motors. And unfortunately, that video never happened because I had some issues, some very, very long issues. So what's it's got in here is what's going to be in there. These are Fangs with a artifact flywheels with the, I think that's the Cyclone wheels in there as well. And this is good because this is a very, very simple small blaster for me to build on. I don't never really like the Strife, but it's good for this purpose since I'm building a replica, or at least close to. And let's talk about building a replica close to. So in my case right here, I was lucky enough to find an entire 3D model that could be printed out to build a replica AK-47 from Rust. Thankfully, I'm not doing that, so it's going to be way more difficult than it needs to be, and I had to edit a lot of these files in order to get them to even remotely work for my purposes here. But I think we're going to have some stuff happen. I'm pretty sure I can get this done. Now, to build a replica out of a Nerf blaster is near impossible, but I can get relatively close as long as I get the overall silhouette very similar, and I have some key features. If you have the things that make the thing the recognizable in the game on this, and the overall silhouette is the same, things being slightly off or slightly different can be excused. You can't make it perfectly since I'm using a pre-existing non-product unless, this can't be used for what I'm trying to do unless the AK was physically bigger and I could just literally stuff this inside of it. That's not the case. I want to build it, relatively to scale. So, the AK-47 from Rust has got the shovel handle for a stock, very funny, and then it's got this beautiful foregrip, an AK-style muzzle, gas system, stuff like that, and that's pretty much all you would need to get the general idea, hey, this is the AK from Rust. Actually, you could probably just have the barrel and the stock, and people would get the idea, but that foregrip is very iconic. Your eye is drawn immediately to that foregrip, so that has to be on there as well. But I did print out a lot more than that, so we're going to start with the pieces I do have, which is the shovel handle part, which is already broken. That's a good sign. I was trying to stuff this pin, test fitting this pin through here. This is for the actual grip of the shovel. And not only did it break because it just was, not thick enough, this was printed at 20% infill, and I thought that would be okay, and clearly that wasn't. But, I mean, it broke. I can fix it. It's not a big deal, but you've got the actual shovel handle right here. This is the pin that goes through here, and then it threads through this right here, which is the actual grip of the shovel, which is pretty much useless since the actual grip is wrapped in like gauze anyway, so thanks for that. Face punch, do appreciate it. And connecting this, there is this piece of, it's supposed to be wood with a little metal plate right there with a pin drove through it, which connects to the back of the AK. Now the AK receiver is of course flat in the back, so I will have to flatten this up, which I'll probably use a pre-existing Nerf attachment to just put on there and then put that on there, and everything's gonna be good to go. And that is it for the stock anyway. Now for the front, which is the other most important part, I have done a lot of work. So this is the foregrip of the AK from Rust. Again, very, very iconic. However, the actual 3D print is one piece that's completely full to have pins and stuff in it, because it doesn't have a normal hollow barrel for shooting things through it. It's a prop. I have modified it, so not only have I cut it in half, but I've also hollowed it out and changed the dimensions slightly, so it's still basically identical to the one from the game, but this, at least design, gives me the best hope of getting this thing on here. And the worst problem with the AK from Rust is that the grip is so high up, the actual barrel of the gun goes through that bottom hole. So not only do I have to get this as close as I can to the flywheel cage, I have to be able to get it just slightly hiked up in order to have the actual barrel go through that original hole. The top hole is where the gas system, like the gas block and the tube and everything, goes through. That's this part right here. This is the top of the barrel. I don't have the actual bottom of the barrel because that's a solid piece and I need to make it shoot Nerf darts, so I'm just gonna attach this to a pre-existing Nerf barrel, or material pretty much similar. This is like the gas block with the top sight on it. This I didn't edit at all. I'm kind of wishing I would have, but I think that this is a pretty easy part to just, you know, cut through and get where I need to. And then these are the 3D printed nuts that I could have just went to Home Depot and found, but these are the ones from the game, so I printed those out. So that's all really good. And then of course we got our very iconic muzzle brake right here with the front post sights. And that is pretty darn awesome right there. And yeah, the other problem I'm going to have is that since this grip is so far up, the actual gun in the game, the magwell, is parallel or flush with this grip. So I'm going to have to remove some of this magwell. There's no way to go around it. I have to do that. Hopefully if I just cut off basically this front part right here, I can still hold a magazine in there, and if I keep the back here, I should still have a mag release to work with, so shouldn't be a big issue. I did print out the trigger guard from the one in the game. This is not a trigger, this is a trigger guard. I might be able to use that. I think I still can, but it's going to be a very much of a chore to have that on there while still being able to use the mag release, so we'll see how that works. And to go one little step further, this grip does not work because the AK in Rust has a very stupid grip. It's basically just a hunk of wood. And, I mean, fair so. So, I have split the grip and I've hollowed it out with... This gives me the best chance of being able to fit this over this existing grip. Now, I am going to take the XSW full auto kit out of the Rage of Dust because it doesn't work right now anyway. There's some fitting issues because the Rage of Dust isn't perfectly a Strife. It's half Strife, half Crossbolt. That's not a fault of the blaster. I just tried to shove something in there that worked a little bit but then stopped working. And, well, I'd rather use it than have that $30 just laying around doing nothing. I have modded that a little bit to make it fit in the Rage of Dust. Hopefully those mods don't stop me from being able to use it in here. But we're going to shove it in here so we can have the full auto capability, and that will also give me an electronic trigger, which means I don't have to worry about the linkage of the actual pusher mech in here, which means I can completely gut this grip if I want to. And I am using right now the mag release that was sent to me by a very young fan quite some time ago. I wanted to include that in this build, but I will be using, of course, the Bobololo style rev trigger that was printed out to me by Michelle from Blaster, or Foam Blast. Foam Blast, thank you. And that's pretty much it. That's the entirety of the build. So most of this build is going to be me fitting parts. And while I have already edited some of these parts, I'm going to have to edit more of the blaster and more of these parts to get it to fit. It's not going to be all that hard. The hardest part is going to be painting. I might hand paint a lot of this blaster. It's going to look grimy and rusty anyway. It doesn't need to be perfectly smooth, so I can get away with that. But man, is this not going to be easy. Again, this is kind of what happens when you make a prop But if I pull this off, this will be one of the coolest things ever. And if I don't pull it off, you won't see this video. So, funny how that's going to work. I am going to cut out some of the stuff, like I'll start sanding, then I'll jump to when it's done. I will have to use these sanding blocks to finish a lot of the actual shell of the blaster, and then of course all these 3D printed parts. To fix the stock, I've got various glues here, the Gorilla Glue Super Glue, and then some DevCon plastic welder, screwdriver, pliers, stuff like that, files, more sandpaper. I've got plenty of parts here, and I've even got, of course, lots of putty as well. So this shouldn't be all that difficult, just a little time consuming. I have a war. This is Monday night, actually. It's probably more like Tuesday morning when I'm recording this, but I have a war on Saturday, and I want to get this at least primed for the war. And I mean, if you prime it, I mean, it's pretty much mostly gray anyway, so we'll see how that works. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Hopefully this works out pretty darn well. Always cut a little bit less because you can file this down pretty easily, but it's kind of hard to have material back, obviously. So that's the first major hurdle. Hopefully this will still take a magazine. Oh man, please work. Yeah, that doesn't work. It does, but, well, yeah, it kind of shakes out, and there's not a whole lot I can do to fix that right now. So, maybe, oh, okay, so its main issue right now is that it's coming forward, but it locks down pretty good, and since I'll have the grip there, I think that'll be fine. I guess I could have cut that a little less so, and that would have helped. But, well, too late now. We'll just make it work. Well, this is probably something I should have done first off, but I had to be able to put this grip kind of where I wanted it. And my god, I wanted this to be farther back. And it's just not going to be possible, because I need, just like the one in the game, I need to have this frickin' gap right here. This piece I will just basically remove some of this and cut that down and then file it down to give a point, and that will just put it there so there will still be a trigger gap. So that should be fine, and the overall length now is pretty darn good. I haven't obviously cut off any of this to fit this piece in there. I still need to cut that in half. I have hollowed out this quite a bit. Really boring, and also really freaking annoying to do, because these things are just a pain to... PLA does not like to be cut, like with a Dremel, that's for sure. It melts and it smells sweet, which is kind of weird. And the grip, that looks pretty fine to me. What I'll do is I'll leave this part up here, but I'll cut it at the angle with the actual grip, and doing that, I can still keep the grip where I need to, and I just need to fit the rev trigger in there. So this is about as close to perfect as I could possibly get, but the main issues I'm having at the moment is I don't have long enough of the orange stuff. It's not even, if I try to put it all the way in there, it's like that. This may still work, though. Yeah, that might work, because that's still pretty darn long. And I need to have the negative space right there. And, oh man, this is just a nightmare scenario. I need to square that off, and doing the back of the receiver is going to be easy. I just need to have, like, bands on it and kind of round it a little bit. But I only have, like, a tube and a half of epoxy putty. This is a lot of body work, and thankfully, thank God, I have not shown you what I had to do over here. I mean, this thing is just mangled, and if I have the grip that far forward, I mean, that's going to be a lot of work, and the worst part, the biggest issue I'm having at the moment, is that no matter what I do, there is literally no way for me to get these even. It won't do it. It's not possible. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to angle it up at the front, and then I'm going to have to cheater my way in the back, probably fill that in with epoxy. What I'll do is I'll coat one side with lithium grease, and then just shove epoxy in there, and have it stick only to one side, and then I'll sand it and get that same thing, and then once it's painted, it should look like the same piece. And that's going to be how, and you shouldn't be able to notice it that much, and from the front, since I'll have it pressed together like that, it should be pretty apparent what's going on. But yeah, I will have to cheat a little bit. There's just no way around that. So this is, for a second there I wanted to give up, because almost I was like, there's no way this is going to work, but I've already printed all the pieces out. I've already gotten this far. I've got to do something, and well, it's already Tuesday night, and I might be able to get, if I don't have any more roadblocks, if I can spend most of Thursday, Friday, tomorrow I'm going shooting with Jose, but if I can get most of the putty just thrown on there and sculpted and then primer it, I should be good. I'll be able to put at least another 20 hours into this over the next, you know, the week. So it probably won't be painted. I will hand paint a lot of it, but yeah, it's getting somewhere. I've got the general shape laid out now, but man, is this going to be hard. It can hold 31, it just won't work. Well, it's been an embarrassing long amount of time, but as you can see, I have essentially destroyed this Strife. It is almost unrecognizable, and this is fine because all of this is going to be covered up cosmetically anyway, but the biggest hurdle, the first biggest hurdle, is I had to get these parts to fit. And I have gotten them to fit, but it's taken a lot of effort to get them to where they are. And I had to get them kinda aligned. The biggest problem, of course, with the Strife is that one side is a lot thicker than the other. In hindsight, it probably would have been a heck of a lot easier to use, like, I don't know, any other blaster. Probably I should have just used the, I don't know, regulator. But I didn't, because I'm a fool. So we're going to have to live with that mistake, because the regulator is far thinner than a Strife is, but I have gotten these parts to essentially fit almost perfectly. The barrel is in line, everything is not cockeyed. It's a little bit right now, but there we go. Everything's pretty much straight, which is good, because that's what we wanted. I can even put the gas tube in here, and that will mount up there and connect right there with some putty. And I mean, it's still not easy. I will have to use a lot of glue and a lot of putty. I mean, that doesn't even count that I have to clean up all of this, which I'll just cover with I don't have any of it around here, but Clowny sent me a lot of plastic plates that I guess are at the bottom of like trailer hitches or something that arrive at Walmart, and he sent me a bunch of that stuff, and that'll be perfect for this, so thank you, Clowny. But it's doing pretty good. Next part is I have to get the whole gas block on there, because this is once I get the gas block, the barrel, the stock, and I shape this back end to look a little more like the AK, and then of course do the grip, the rest of it will be purely cosmetic, because if you take a glance at it, it will look like the AK from Rust. I mean, there will be no mistaking. I do want to get this style of trigger guard on there, which will be, I don't even know if that's going to be possible, because there's I would have to cut it really thin right there, and try to glue this in. Of course, this isn't even 2 pieces, it's in 1 piece, so that makes my life a lot harder, but I think it might be able to get done, and that doesn't even count actually getting the whole grip on there, which, since I'm using a electronic trigger, won't be that bad. I could always just cut it right there, stick this on there, and stick a, you know, freaking switch in there. That might be easier to do, but it will still be very hard. But getting this gas block on there, this is what I originally printed out, which is the stock piece from the AK, and I quickly realized this isn't going to work at all. So what I did is I took the file, I split it apart in Slicer, and then I took it into Tinkercad, and I hollowed it out quite a bit. Tinkercad is really, really useful, and I've actually trimmed it a bit as well, and I think I've just about got it. If I can put this right there, and just a little bit of trimming on the other side, which I'll do. I'll try to sand it down with a file first, but it is darn near close. I'll just have to trim a little bit and sand some pieces, and I'll be able to get that on there. And that will give it the big hump right here with the actual sight, and then the back will be lower than the hump, and that will have I'll have to put on, obviously, some kind of stock attachment and cut it down so it's flat, then put a piece of, like a block on it, and then I'll have to put this stock on there, and then I can use that to angle it kind of in the way that the actual AK does, and then have the little bands up here. On the side, this is going to be really difficult. I still want to get rid of these lines right here, so I will probably putty this up and try to make that in line. I will still have the jam clear door because I pretty much have to, but it will still look like the gun from Rust. It will not look like a Strife when I'm done with it, because I'm going to completely change these lines right here with putty, which is great because I really don't want people to guess what this blaster looked like ahead of time. However, I'm coming quickly to the realization I probably should have just used, I don't know, a freaking regulator like the one I've already killed. I could have just used that, which already has an AK-style shape, has the grip and everything in the right position. I'm an idiot. But I'm still going to get it done, and I think the overall body of the regulator would be too long for what I'm trying to do here. That's at least my excuse for not feeling totally bad. I didn't think about it until this far in. And what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to make sure all of my parts fit, which is going to be a little more work with this, basically just cutting into the plastic and removing, you know, a couple millimeters of plastic here or there, just enough to get me where I'm at. And after I get that in, I got all the parts fit, I need to modify the parts to have some kind of hole in them, which is really difficult because these don't like being drilled into at all, but I need to figure out some way to have these screw posts in there. I should have just added them in, I think not Tinkercad, I believe Fusion 360 has like a built-in screw post thing, or actually I could have just done it in Tinkercad too. I could have just taken a tube, but that would be far too much work because I had no idea where exactly these pieces would fit anyway. I'm not good enough at 3D modeling to do more than what I've already done. I'm amazed I could even get these parts, you know, somewhat cut and put on here to begin with, let alone actually like measuring the Strife and measuring the piece and cutting it. That's too much to ask for. I wanted to combine the actual body work with the actual modification. And the internals are already done. I have a cage in here. It's not even stock, it's a printed one. I just have that in there to mount the barrel, but the internals are pretty much done. The last thing I'll have to do is I'll have to take out the, I'll take the full auto kit out of the Rage of Dusk, because since that wasn't really working that well anyway, and I'm going to stuff it in here since it should work flawlessly in here, because the Rage of Dusk is only half crossbolt, half Strife. It doesn't work all that well. Hopefully it will work fine in here, and since I'll have an electronic trigger because of that, I'll be able to completely replace the grip, which, it's honestly really close. It's really freaking close to the actual thickness of the original grip. So I won't have to do that much. If I really need to, I will bandsaw it right here and just put it in and rewire the trigger and do whatever the heck I want to, just guide all that stuff with putty. But hopefully I can just sand this down a bit and sandwich this over. I'm gonna have to obviously cut it right here, right there, and then hopefully be able to drill holes in there and put the screws. But that's where we're at. We're getting close. It's been many hours of sanding. I've got a bunch of different types of sandpaper here, a lot of cutting. I've just abused my old Gunpla snippers here. And it's going to be a lot of work to get it back into a Strife, but honestly I think this is the easiest way to go when doing a modification like this. But it's gonna be hard. The asymmetry of the Strife is really kicking my rear here. I do not like that, but I think we're getting somewhere. I think actually the worst part is gonna be the smiley face. I know that sounds silly. My best bet is to find a card somewhere and cut out a stencil. But I really think the smiley face is going to be my biggest obstacle in getting this thing done. Painting, it's going to be fun, because I'm just going to do, you know, a base coat, another coat, and then I'm just going to take rags and just dirty the crap out of it, and it should be pretty easy. But I'm really worried about that smiley face. Intricate detail like that just doesn't work for me. But I will keep pressing along. I hope to have this done in the next couple of days. I hope to just be able to, you know, pound 15, 20 hours into it over the next couple of days and get this thing done, because I want it done. I've been skinning this Strife grip like a frickin' potato, and it technically works, but I'm gonna have a gap. And I also don't like the fact that the grip is like stupidly long, because the one in the game is absolutely short. And I know I already said this, but I said it doesn't matter because I'm going to have electronic triggers, so I could cut the whole grip off. And I was just being lazy. I didn't really want to have to, you know, file holes in here for triggers and use putty to stop them and glue the switches. And then to screw that, we're cutting off the grip. So that's a good waste of like 25 minutes right there. Now, I know I didn't want to necessarily do that because I wanted to keep the screw posts. I'll just screw post these. I'm done, because now it's like, oh, I can put this together and put this like right there, and that's frickin' perfect, dude. And then I just have to put some holes in it so it will you know, it can take triggers. Oh god, I didn't actually check to see if the trigger will still work. I'm sure it will be fine, but man, that is one messed up Strife. There's almost nothing left, but we're really close to putting some putty on this thing. A little bit more. Actually, I think that's pretty much it. If I can get these pieces manufactured and worked in there, and I can like frickin' glue triggers in there and like, oh, it works, then we're pretty much done. But Jiminy Christmas. I really hope I didn't just screw myself. I have one more Strife. Technically 4 more if you count the blue Strifes I have. None of my blue Strifes have internals in them, which is hilarious, but I can only do this a couple more times, Morty. I like 2 or 3 more times max. I hope this works. So I've just spent what I think is like another hour trying to get a battery to fit in here, and I have done it. It's It's just a zippy, compact 3S LiPo. But for whatever reason, even though these 3 batteries are the same, one of them is like half the width. And yes, it is a 3S, so I don't even know. I really don't. But the cool thing is yeah, it pretty much fits in here. Not going to be optimal. I'd rather use, of course, a graphene, but since I don't really dabble that much in 2S, and I'm pretty hell-bent on using Fangs, since I have failed several builds trying to use Fangs so far, I want to redeem myself. Will you? Like, you were fitting. Now you're really not. Huh. How about if I just, like, do that? There we go. It fits pretty okay. It's not great. It's a little bowy, but I think it'll be fine. This trigger works excellently, which is good. I just went ham. I just cut the freaking grip off that I spent all that time doing. And I have taken these, I have cut a little bit out of the front there. It's a really rough. To fix that, I'm probably going to go over it with some putty to fill in the gaps if I need to. But that fits literally perfectly right there. And if that don't look like Rust AK grip, I don't know what freaking does, man. It's even got a built-in stop so the trigger won't go back all the way. So, from here, what I'll need to do is I've got my handy dandy, I'm actually struggling to breathe right now because of all these particulates in the air, but I've got my handy dandy $3 portable freaking glue gun. This is the best thing I have ever bought. And I am going to take this thing, and I'm going to put this in such a way that it is even. Actually, first things first, we're going to take this grip, and we're going to make it even Stevens. We're going to glue it on the inside, so it's pretty perfect. Let's try that over here as well. Just get that aligned, let that glue cool down and cure. But we'll get this thing solid, then we're going to glue it on here, then we're going to pull the blaster apart. I just realized it's a bad idea because I have to pull the blaster apart. But we're going to put this on there in a way that it's basically even. I guess it's wood, so it doesn't have to be super perfect. That's kind of the allure of doing a mod from Rust. But get it on there, and then putty the inside, or DevCon glue it. I haven't figured out what I'm going to do yet. Probably a little bit of both. And then once we got that in there, I just need to fit the, I'll have to cut another notch in it for the entire rev trigger and reinforce the crap out of that. I'll have to put a screw hole in here somewhere, I'm pretty sure. I might not have to, I don't know, but it's getting there. It's really freaking close. We're finally to the point where I can start actually putting on parts of the flickin' blaster, which is great. I did drag out the full auto kit. I've got the spring of a thing right here, and somewhere around here I had the actual, I don't know where I put it. Somewhere around here I had the actual full auto spring of a thing. I don't think it's in there. Oh, here it is. This is the actual full auto thing. I replaced the motor with a whatever, I don't know what the stock one was, but I replaced it with a Rhino so there's more torque so I can control the fire rate better. Holy crap, it's been a long freaking time, but this is finally starting to look like a blaster. Look at me actually getting smart and zooming in and everything. So, I've gotten the grip actually tacked in on the sides here, and I've edited the trigger to look more like the actual, you know, a trigger, and that's working swimmingly. It's a little wobbly. I don't think that'll be an issue once I get the actual micro switch and stuff in there. This I have cut off of this piece, and I'm gonna try, since this already has, like, you know, the nut and everything on there, I'm gonna try to get that in about right there, which should be fine. Again, it's just supposed to be like a little trigger guard looking thing. So, get that in something like that, and that will still give me some room for the trigger, and then I'll still be able to reach forward with this finger. Of course, I still have to put in a rev trigger. I'm not going to be using the SLA printed ones from Foam Blast, I'm going to be using the 3D printed ones. Simply because these are super nice and unfinished parts, and these are super nice and almost finished parts, which should go in a blaster I don't need to do a crap ton of work on, as opposed to this thing, which is like, it's barely a blaster. It's getting there. Now it's actually getting somewhere, but it was barely a blaster before I put this grip on it. The grip is surprisingly comfortable, but it is actually starting to look like what I wanted it to. There is one more concession I'm gonna have to make, and that's with regards to the gas block. Now, I've gotten it on here. I have it fit, but... Oh, that's the one for the... Where's the actual... There it is. I've gotten it to fit, but the problem is I can't get this grip up high enough for this to actually... And I can't get the gas block low enough. So I'm gonna have to do pretty much this. It's not gonna meet up with the original holes. There's no way for me to do that. I don't think that's a big deal. I even checked the sites and they still align, if not anything, they align better with the actual front post. And I don't think that's a big deal. I'm gonna probably widen this hole right up here at the front of the strife and tuck that in there, and I'll use some putty to glue in that. But yeah, these fit pretty freaking well. That's gonna look really good when that's done. I'm quite pleased with how all this crap is turning out. The biggest issue, of course, is that I'm like, oh, I'm gonna record all this stuff, but as opposed to the, what was it, the Prophecy build, where I did basically everything in like, I don't know, 4 hours max, this is over the course of several flippin' days, and it's getting really annoying having to charge my battery and stuff like that and having to wait, and I'm running out of time. I wanted this done Saturday morning. I don't know if I'm going to be able to reach that. If I just forego pretty much everything and not use the epoxy sculpt and just use my normal Odie Fix-It stick, which I think I have enough here to do most of what I want, I think I can get this done. But I wanted to fill in like this stuff right here. I want to try to get rid of as many of the strife lines as I can, just so it's not super obvious it's a strife anymore. I was going to fill this in right here and redo that line, and that would be way easier to do with the epoxy sculpt, but I think this literally takes 24 hours. Working time is 1 to 3 hours, 24 hours to fully cure rock hard. And that would mean even if I did it right now, it would be 2 o'clock in the morning Saturday morning. And that wouldn't even count, like, actually frickin' doing the video. I could always shoot for Sunday, but I don't know. I mean, I want to get this done. I want to get it done right, and this doesn't even count for painting. Painting I'm actually not worried about, since what this is supposed to be, obviously being the thing from Rust, is the paint job is going to be dirty anyway, and since I'm not good at painting, this will work perfectly fine. And I do want to make a coffee can helmet out of EVA foam, which honestly, that should only take me maybe 2 hours with painting, because it's 2 basic shapes glued to the existing rival mask and put on there. I'm a little upset about this bulge on the battery door, but I just can't fix that, and I'm actually pretty worried about getting the actual wires and everything done. I'm running out of space in this blaster, believe it or not. If I can get this thing apart. I'm almost thinking about seeing if I can't put the battery in the grip. That would really help me, because with the full auto kit in here, like, so here's the actual battery with the connector. That's about the best I could do right there. If I put, where is it? The full auto kits, yeah, here it is. If I put this in here, well, it tucks into this spot right up against the battery. It's actually kind of a pain to get in there. In fact, the wires are already pinching it, and I have to be able to have these wires in there and have a connector running, and it just might not be possible. Maybe if I can flip the battery around? I haven't actually tried. Huh. Well, that's freaking good to know. Oh, what might actually help my fitting is if I cleaned up this plastic right here that's clearly getting in the way of the door. Probably didn't need to trim off as much as I did. Oh, now it's like freaking flush. Oh, perfect. Well, not perfect, but as close to perfect as we're going to get with something like this. Well, that's just awesome. And then I can just route that back, and that keeps me clear out of the way of the full auto kit, which was my, well, not clear out of the way, but it clears, it gives me more room to work with, which is good. So we can put that in there. That should be all kinds of awesome. I put that in there. There should be no issue with this thing wiggling or anything like that, like it was doing in the Rage of Dust. So yeah, there we go. There we go. This is looking pretty darn good. I don't know if I'm moving too fast for this beautiful relationship we have going on here, but I'm trying really hard to get through this, and there's just so many parts that I'm not really filming, like cutting this piece out. I needed to cut into the grip a little bit because I'm an idiot and I glued it too far back, which will probably ruin the aesthetic. I'm a little upset about that, but it looks pretty decent so far. So I made this plate here, and this plate will cover the motors for me and mesh up rather nicely with the grip. So this is the time where we bust out the epoxy sculpt. The hell is going on there? That's not cool. It's like it just came off a truck. I guess we just grab a good chunk of it. It's a pretty big chunk. We grab an, let's knead that together a little bit. There we go. We grab a pretty big chunk of this, which is far easier to grab a chunk of. That's pretty close. We'll take a little bit more. There we go. And we're gonna knead this together to make sculpted epoxy. I normally don't use gloves because they're friggin' annoying, and this is not helping their case. I'm really worried about how far back that stupid grip is, though. How did I manage to do that? I mean, this stuff just looks like Odie's fixing stick. It's like the same color. Literally the same color. It's supposed to have a working time of like 3 friggin' hours, so let's try doing this. And the good news is once I get this on here, I can smooth it out relatively easily with my finger. So it shouldn't be a huge deal. Of course, I've sanded the ever-loving crap out of the actual plate itself to get rid of whatever finisher they use. I may have to come back in a few hours and try to press this plate down into it, because it's just not working. Maybe if I have enough weight on top of it, kinda works. Oh, this stuff does smooth out relatively easily. Alright, well, I'm gonna work at this for a while and we'll see where it takes us. Oh, well, it's been a little while. Mostly just sanding and putting. I actually don't even remember the last thing I recorded because I have not been feeling good and I've been trying to get this stupid thing done. But if I haven't covered it, there's a plate that's underneath here that covers the gap from the flywheels. And then all of this is putty. The white putty you see is actually epoxy sculpt, which I spent many hours putting on the blaster and then using water to smooth it out like a clay, which worked really freaking well. Then I went over that, and I'll probably go over it a little bit more to try to even out, because where you see it more red than anything, that's where the putty is actually lower. So that makes it more even. I'll probably do it once or twice, but that also gets rid of any scratches that are in the putty as well. And generally just tries to make it look more like one more complete thing. My main issue I'm having at the moment is the grip is not even. It won't really matter that much, and it's hard to get on camera. It won't matter because if you see it from the side, it won't matter. If you see it from the front, it won't matter, and it's supposed to look like something that's cobbled together from parts anyway. But it bothers me. I'm gonna try to fix it because I've worked so hard, but I'm pretty upset about that. I know exactly what I did wrong. The grip was actually a little bit was broken right here, and I was supposed to have them even. And what I did is I put them together and then pushed them back until they locked. And this one went back further than it was supposed to. And there's no way I can fix that now, so I'm just gonna have to roll with it and hopefully get this sucker done. And hopefully start painting soon. That's kind of my #1 goal at the moment, is to get this thing painted, because while this is a blaster, it doesn't look entirely like a blaster until it's painted. I also still have to get the rev trigger done, or I might try to do what I did with the Thompson and just have one trigger and put the rev trigger behind that, so when you pull it back, it revs the blaster, and then if you pull it back all the way, it starts firing the blaster. Not sure. We'll figure it out. Actually, that should work fine since it's a fully automatic blaster. I'll probably just do that. So I know that this shiny plastic you find on jam doors doesn't take paint all that well, because I struggled really hard to paint the one on the Rage of Dust, which I eventually just gave up on. This one I'm going to try to sand as much as possible, and thankfully it looks like I'm going to have to see if I can't make it a little bit higher. It's gonna have to kinda even this out a little bit. So I'm gonna try to put this in there. I'm gonna see if I can't raise it up a bit. And if I use putty, hopefully the putty will stick to it fine, as opposed to paint, and then I can just paint the putty. I do have vinyl dye I can try to use as well, and I'm just gonna go to town with the sanding sponge. This one sanding sponge has helped me so much with this blaster. I've used basically 3 pieces of sandpaper of various grits and then this sanding sponge. They're pretty expensive. I think 3 of these sponges at my local Ace was like $7 or $8, but it's really, really helped. So I'm just gonna go to town on it, try to get off whatever coating they use on this very, very slick nylon kind of plastic. I don't really know what kind of plastic it is, but it's the same kind of finish. Everything else is pretty much done. This has been a long time coming. This has been a lot of work to get this. I've went over this stuff to make it baby butt smooth. I've went over it, I think 4 times with the glazing putty and just went to town. And I really hope it looks good when it's painted, because this is just, oh, I've been sick for days. I don't know, I wear a mask when I'm sanding, and I still don't think that's helped me at all. I wonder if this stuff is actually getting in my lungs and hurting me. This does have a filter and stuff on it. I do make sure it's pressed really tightly in my mask. There's not really anything on the inside of it. There's a little bit of orange, but I'm assuming that's from when I take it off. Hopefully this works. I've been just absolutely destroying myself trying to get this thing done. And I like where it's at, I really do. This stock is still not completely solidified yet. I'll get to that. I like how this is removable. I can almost put this on any other blaster. But yeah, this has been fun, but I'm starting to get a little bored with how much work I've put into it. I don't know how many days it's been since I last shot anything, and I know I've skipped a lot of places here, and the only reason I've skipped places is because most of this is stuff that I can just explain afterwards and explain why I did it, and there's a lot of stuff that I did that I didn't need to do. For all intents and purposes, it is essentially done. I think I might do a little bit more spot putty up here at the gas piping thing, but let's see. Let's take this apart one by one. Now, the stock is a Retaliator stock that I cut down, and I put 3 screws into the back of this piece, and I covered that with epoxy putty on a piece of that plastic plating that Clowny sent me. And then I've covered that with some epoxy putty and glue and stuff like that, and I've already dropped it. It holds up. In fact, I've broken chimps off the stock right here, but it still works just fine. And I haven't finished gluing this together because I still need to take it apart to paint it, but that's pretty much done except for the pin that goes in here, and I've sanded that out a lot. So that is the stock that goes on the end here, and that will actually be usable on other blasters if I wanted to. I will take out the jam door. It's not pinned right now, but the jam door is basically a complete piece of clay at this point. I have sanded it and put it together in such a way that it removes the lines from the original Strife, and that was my most important goal. I wanted it to look less like, oh, it's a Strife jam door, and have something there. It still has a line per se, but I can't fix that without going over this with more putty, and that just makes it brittle and damages. This is a very, very thick piece of putty now. And when it's pinned in there, it won't actually operate. Oh well, I don't really have a fix for that right now. Just gotta have to deal with it, because I've never seen a jam that I couldn't clear by just, you know, taking out the magazine and fishing up in there, so I don't see a problem with that. And it looks like a part that doesn't belong, or, well, it looks like a part that belongs, but it's handmade, and that's kind of the entire point of this blaster. I know that it's not like a super duper accurate, like to a T millimeter kind of thing replica. I've had to take a lot of liberties, but when it comes to building a replica out of an existing blaster, not only did I not just take a bunch of 3D printed parts and slap them on here and call it, oh, it's this, and you can clearly say, no, it's not, but I've worked it in such a way that I've put literally a week of body work into this stupid thing, and it turned out, and it's still, like, there's no mistaking. If you didn't know what this is from, then you're like, well, that looks like some kind of cobbled together AK-47, but if you've played Rust, you'd be like, that's the AK from Rust. So I think I accomplished that goal, but I'll find out when I actually post the video. I did put the plastic plate, I don't know if I filmed that or not, but to cover up this whole gap right here that I cut out originally, because I needed to remove those lines, I just took a piece of that plastic plate, cut it in here, and covered it with, this was Epoxy Sculpt. Epoxy Sculpt worked really freaking well. The only problem I had with Epoxy Sculpt is it literally takes a day to dry, or cure. And I didn't have that kind of time. So a lot of the stuff I went over with Epoxy Sculpt, and then I re-went over a lot of other places with just normal Odie's Fix-It Stick, which is my go-to putty for most things. And I think it turned out good. The lines are all really decent in my opinion. It's still gonna have, even though I tried to sand this as smoothly as I could, and I went over this several times with filler putty. I used Bondo, here it is, Bondo glazing spot putty for that. Even though I went over it several times, there's just no possible way to get that completely flat. I mean, I would have to level it and scrape down, and I just don't have that kind of effort. And on top of that, it's not necessary, because if this looks too clean, it doesn't look right. So on areas where there will be obvious little tiny divots, I will highlight the edges with the dry brushing, and that will make it look like a dent in the receiver, which is perfectly fine. This should look like it's stamped sheet metal anyway. The front here, I haven't put the actual bolt pieces. I can only find 2 of them at the moment, and right now I can't find any of them, but, oh, here they are. These are the nuts that go on the gas tube right there, the gas system. I'll put those in, I'll hopefully find the other 2 and put those on. This whole area is empty. I was gonna fill this in. I decided against it, simply because it looks better. It looks dirty, but when it's painted, you won't see that. You'll just see the actual tube in there, and that should be perfectly fine. But the gas system and all that, it's tapped into the front here. That's also an ugly freaking hole. But again, when it's painted, it will be less noticeable. It is completely removable, which is good, because I'll be able to break the blaster down into essentially 3 pieces. I can't get closer to that in Nerf. It's just not possible. I would basically just have to make an entirely new blaster, and I've essentially done that, but for it to get any closer than it already is, it's insanity to me. I don't really think it's done. I could probably have spent another week sanding and getting these kind of tolerances perfect, but at the same time, it's not meant to be perfect. It's meant to look like a handmade gun. And it will have parts in it that were from an actual AK or some kind of rifle, but the majority of the weapon should look like it's handmade. I wish I had a more curved magazine to go in there, but it works, in all honesty. It will work. So at this point, I'm pretty much ready to paint. I will paint it tomorrow. I will abuse the crap out of the hairdryer and I will get this thing basically ready for the war tomorrow. I wanted to get not tomorrow, Saturday. Today is Thursday. I really wanted to get the video out Friday. I don't think I'll be able to. And worst case scenario is I get the video out Sunday, which is not optimal. I'd rather get it out Saturday or Friday. But I'm going to try. The only hard thing I have to do is I have to wire in the whole XSW kit, which I have here. Hopefully it still works. I think it will, but you never know. Hopefully it does. I will be very upset if it doesn't. I was going to use the Foam Blast whole, the voltmeter thing. I won't be able to do that. There's no way. I lost my jam door somewhere. I'm not quite sure. I remember where I put that, but I've put too much effort into it already. The wires fit. I'll just wire up the thing. The trigger system, I'm pretty sure I'm going to go with the same thing I did with the Thompson. I'm going to have rev and then fire, and that way if you only half let off the trigger, it will just rev. But I think I'm making a lot of excuses. To you at home, now that you know the flaws, I've showed it to you, you'll be like, oh yeah, no, those are major flaws. At this point, the only thing I can really tell you is that I spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours sanding and fitting this blaster. And I've done... It's not supposed to be able to do this. Like, this was not meant to... The Strife was not meant to take this much stuff. This 3D model was never meant to go on this body. And I've somehow kind of made it work. And that's kind of the most important thing. At the end of the day, that's all I could really hope for. Excuse me, I'm still a little bit under the weather, is to just make it have the basic profile and the most noticeable details of the weapon from Rust. Everything after that is gravy. And I think I've succeeded at doing that. I can't wait to get primer on this, because at this point it looks great. Once you get primer on it, that's when everything comes together. But that's also where the biggest flaws stand out, which is a problem. But we will take that as it goes. I will do one more pass of the glazing putty on this to smooth out those edges. But other than that, I am freaking... I can't get any better than this, in all honesty. I could spend another week doing minor details that nobody's going to appreciate but me. And I should do that, but I've spent so much time working on this thing. At this point, I kind of just want it done. So what I'm doing here is I'm prepping the parts for sanding. So I'm cleaning them right now, which I use alcohol for. You can use water, but alcohol evaporates a heck of a lot quicker. And this is to get rid of any dust, which is, well, all over this blaster. It's all over me. It's all over my entire shop. I would probably dying. It's probably why I've had so many problems breathing, but it gets rid of dust and oils and stuff that would stop paint from strictly adhering to the blaster, which we don't want. We don't want any problems painting our blaster here. Alright, I've had these cans of primer. There's not much primer here. Hopefully I have another can somewhere. Otherwise I'll have to pick another can up. I know the Rust-Oleum stuff always says it has paint and primer, but for something like this, it's kind of important that you have some kind of adhesion promoter. Usually I just use automotive adhesion promoter, but I want to neutralize the colors, so I want to blend everything into one color. So these have been sitting in warm water for the last 10-15 minutes to get the paint flowing, and the whole point is to basically lightly dust them first. Ooh. Hopefully I didn't get that anywhere else. No, see, I've already messed up. I've gotten water droplets from the cans on the blaster. I mean, I'm gonna... Let's just get rid of those boxes here. I can already tell you're going to be a problem. Now normally, I would be doing everything I can to quicken this process, and I still am when it comes to the actual painting. But for right now, I'm just trying to get primer on it. I'm not going to do any more painting tonight. I think it's already 1 in the morning. I want to relax a bit so I can actually get some sleep. And from there, tomorrow is when I'll worry about actually getting this thing done in terms of painting. A lot of the extra color is stuff, oops, I'm just, oh, don't drop that. A lot of the other colors are stuff I'm going to hand brush on anyway, which is not something I've ever done, but I don't really have a choice. There's no way I could tape off all of this stuff. Alright, so I've got the parts primed. They're reasonably well. I'm just going to stick with the primer for the base coat. Normally I like to use black, but there's not really a lot of black on the blaster. So I'm going to go with my gut on this one and think that I should just do a, just go to town with it. So what I've done is I've taken these absolutely ancient, I don't think these have like a date on them anywhere. These belong to my grandmother, and she passed away almost a decade ago. And I'm sure she had these for a long time before that. So these are really old acrylics, but I've got a black, 2 different kinds of browns, and I've got an orange here, a very bright orange, and hopefully those work fine. And I'm basically just going to go to town on the blaster. I also have some rub and buff. I've got some silver here, which is what I'll use for most of my dry brushing, although I'll probably go to town. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just going to start painting in some of the areas that I need to paint in on this thing, and essentially after I'm done, I'm then going to take the acrylic black here and just give it a wipe down all over the place, make it look grungy and dirty. I've got a lot of weathering pigments I can throw on it as well, but I just have to do the best job I can possibly do at this point. I mean, there's not a whole lot left of it in the painting, and the worst part is there's just so much to paint on this thing. There are, of course, imperfections, and hopefully I can just hide those with paint, because, I mean, well, weathering's, that's kind of what it's for, but we'll see. I'm hoping this turns out. It looks a lot better on camera than it does in real life, but I think that goes with pretty much everything, including myself. So in order to do this, I have got a little dish here that I'll use to try to soften up my actual acrylics. I've got a thing of warm water here, and this cardboard box I'll use as a kind of palette. And I've just got some random brushes and stuff like that, and I'm just basically gonna go to town on it and hope I can get something that looks pretty decent. Oh, it's really cold out here, so I'm gonna make this really freaking quick. I'm actually gonna have to go inside to try to finish the actual soldering. But what I've done is painted it with a variety of acrylics that you see over here, all of them ancient. I then went over the entire blaster with some silver rub and buff, and then I went over the entire blaster with silver spray paint and a sponge brush, and then I went over the entire blaster with a paper towel and black acrylic paint, and that's how I get this kind of stuff right here. I'm not really happy with how this side turned out. I'm not really happy with how the smiley face turned out. It's a sticker in the game, but I don't have a sticker. But when I stand back, this looks really good. This looks really good. I have a bright orange tip, as bright as I can get. It looks like it's coming together now. I still have to actually solder in the XFW kit, and I have to solder, like, do the new switch, because originally it was semi-auto, now it's not. But that looks pretty darn good. I even roughed up a magazine here a little bit, and I'm going to cover the magazine and the shovel handle with gauze, and then I'm going to weather that up with some black and browns and stuff like that. And that's basically the blaster. As long as this thing fires, I'm good, but It's 9 o'clock at night, I think. 8 something. And that's the story of the Rust AK. I did survive the war. I played with it just a little bit, but I wasn't really feeling good for the war. I did have the blue like flagging tape on this, which I had glued on. It didn't really hold all that well, but the stock did break off, and I did fix it. The reason for that is, again, it was printed at like a 20% infill, so even though I put screws in it, the screws weren't biting into anything. So I just filled this part up with epoxy putty, which worked out pretty good. I will have to just basically dry brush weather that on top of what I already have here, but it survived, it works, it's comfortable, it performs pretty darn well. I'm happy with how it works, and I really hope you learned something watching this painfully long video. And I know there's still going to be people who are going to be upset I didn't cover absolutely frickin' everything. If you're wondering about the wiring in here, it's wired identically to a Rapid Strike. The only difference is instead of having 2 physical triggers, there's only one, and one of the micro switches is kind of level with the trigger, so when you pull it back, the part of the trigger, there's a big square piece in the back of it, the back end of that hits the firing mechanism, but as it's going backwards, there's a lever from another trigger that will get pressed down, which will be the rev, and those are just hot glued in there, and it works really well. And this is one of my favorite things I've built so far. I'm a little disappointed how there's this big gap here with this, and I might just pull the pin out of that and just set it in there and magnetically hold it on there. But in terms of being like a replica from the game, and just being a very intimidating feeling blaster when you're holding it, I'm very, very happy. If I have anything else I'm going to do to this thing besides fix the tape that was on the back of this thing, I'm going to actually fully paint this front piece with like the wood-like color, because I know that's on the X. This whole piece right here is all wood, and then this is a metal plate, and I only painted a little bit of that wood, which is not perfect, but I like how this thing turned out. I hope you learned something watching my painfully long building process, and again, this entire build was funded by Patreon. I really do appreciate those of you who have checked out my Patreon and contributed to it. If you haven't seen it, please take a look. If there's something there worth your dollar to throw my way to help fund these kinds of projects and to offset the amount of work required to make a video like this, because I've been sitting there editing this thing for just hours. Collecting footage. Collecting several hours worth of footage and editing it down into just a couple of clips is really difficult, but I'm quite happy with how things turned out, and I hope that you learned something and you were inspired by it. I'm Wacom S7, thank you very much for watching this video, and of course I hope to see you in an entirely different one.